Well, you take a little nut, you place it on a rock, then you get another and you hit it on the top. Hickory nut boogie, well, they're falling all around.
Hickory is walnut's lesser-known relative. Nuts from this tree are mild and sweet. Look for them in mid-September when they fall onto the ground. Be vigilant because squirrels are waiting for them too. There are several species of hickory, but the best nuts come from the shagbark hickory, which is easily identified by the way its bark partially peels off the trunk in vertical strips. Hickory husks are circular, green, and have 4 distinct sections that split open to release the shell inside. These shells can be opened with a nutcracker. It's difficult to remove the nut meats in big pieces. Perhaps that's why they're just not available in the stores here in Massachusetts, and why my harvest is limited to whatever I'm willing to process myself. Be careful not to include any hard shell pieces with the nuts. Use hickories interchangeably in any recipe that calls for walnuts. Like walnuts, these nuts need to be dried and stored in their shells, since once they're exposed to air, they turn rancid. They're full of protein, carbs, iron, potassium, and vitamins A and C. Whether you eat hickories raw or cooked, dry roast them for better flavor. Southerners roast and salt them for a quick snack. Apple stuff is a simple recipe that uses 2 of autumn's most delicious gifts: apples and nuts. Place slices from 6 or more organic apples into a 2-quart baking dish. Sprinkle with nutmeg and cinnamon to taste. Make a topping from 3 tablespoons melted organic butter or oil, 1½ teaspoons maple syrup, 1/4 cup finely ground roasted hickory nuts, and enough whole wheat flour to thicken the mix. If it's too thick, thin it down with some fruit juice. Cover the apples with this and bake at 375 degrees for 50 to 60 minutes or until the apples are soft. Add this dessert to cereal, yogurt, or ice cream. It's tasty and healthy. Shagbark hickory is also the source of 2 beverages. To make the first one, you can use just nut meats, but believe me, it's frustrating to remove them from their shells. This is time-consuming. A simple solution to this dilemma was discovered by Native Americans. They used both nut meats and their shells to prepare a drink they called pokikora. To make nuts easier to crack, put husked shells in water and discard floating ones. Place the remainder in a 350-degree oven for 15 minutes. Then cool them down. Now they're ready to process. If you choose to go outside, find a clean, hard surface to fracture each nut. Just for fun, I used a found piece of wood as my hammer. I wanted to see if it worked, and it did. Cover each nut with an old cloth to avoid flying debris, and don't hit your fingers. A real hammer will work as well. If you do this inside, a nutcracker is best. Although frankly, I think a hammer used outside works more efficiently. Use all pulverized pieces, shells as well as nut meats. The smaller they are, the better. Once the nuts and shells are in pieces, measure them, place in a pot, and cover with water that's 3 times the amount of the nut bits. For example, if you have 1 cup hickories, then add 3 cups water. I use only enough nuts for a few servings. That way, the juice gets used up while it's fresh. Cover the pot and simmer for about 30 minutes. Stir every 10 minutes to unlock more flavor. After this time, remove the lid and simmer for 10 to 15 minutes or more. The longer you do this, the stronger the beverage will be. The water turns brownish. Many nut pieces rise to the top while the heavier shells sink to the bottom. Skim these nuts off the surface with a spoon into a fine mesh strainer. This is tedious when making a small amount and probably not worth doing unless you make a large batch. Although some flavor is leached out in simmering, these salvaged nuts can be dried. I use an old standby, my radiator top. Don't rinse them, they lose taste. Watch out for and remove any hard shell pieces that may be mixed in with them. Then pour the contents of the pot into a container to filter out leftover debris. Transfer this liquid into a glass and use your choice of sweetener and/or various spices such as cardamom, cinnamon, cloves, or nutmeg. Add a dash of vanilla to enhance the flavor. Serve this hot or cold. Use the juice in smoothies or instead of water in cooked cereals. No matter how you choose to consume it, pokikora has a mellow, earthy aftertaste. I toss leftover shell pieces with nut remnants trapped inside onto the ground below my bird feeders. So perhaps, wishful thinking, squirrels will go after them instead of the bird food. Here's a way to make this drink even better. If you have an abundance of hickory nuts, save some to use later on in the year. They'll keep as long as they're left in their shells and stored in a container in a cool place. When maple sap starts to flow in late February, use the nuts in combination with the sap water to brew the drink. I collect sap from this tree in my backyard and use the liquid for my beverage. As you can see, my method is quite simple. I don't boil it down into maple syrup. I use the sap right from the tree. To make the drink, follow my previous instructions, but substitute sap water for tap water. If you simmer the juice longer, it'll be sweeter. The combination of smoky hickory flavor with maple sap is pure ambrosia. So delicious and worth waiting for. Another drink is made from this tree's distinctive shedding bark, which is available any time of year. Look for pieces that have fallen onto the ground, or remove some loose ones from the trunk. It won't hurt the tree. You don't need many of these strips for the beverage. Remove dirt and insects from the bark by scrubbing with a stiff brush under cool water. Don't use soap or detergent. Dry the pieces. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees and break the bark into 4 to 8 inch pieces. Place these onto parchment paper and toast for 10 to 15 minutes or until you smell a smoky aroma. Be sure to keep an eye on them or they might burn and become bitter. Place the bark in a pan, cover with water, and simmer for 20 minutes. Don't boil, since that will release bitter tannins. The liquid becomes a deep amber color. Remove the bark and add sweetener if you want. I stop here, but you could continue this process and make a syrup by adding a fair amount of sugar. Various internet sites give directions on how to do this. Turkey Woods Farm in Mystic, Connecticut, sells the syrup as well as other hickory-related products. The hickory tree generously shares its bounty with us. All we have to do is make use of its delicious gifts.
Well, I'm a-picking 'em up, putting 'em away, saving 'em back for any day. Hickory nut boogie, the best nut around. Well, I'll be eating hickory nuts tonight.